Spotlight.
This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on Udyami Diwas 2025, role of MSMEs in shaping India's economic future. The participants are Anil Padmanabhan, Economic Analyst, and Rajesh, Laikh, Anchor.
Hello and welcome on the occasion of International MSME Day 2025. As we celebrate Udyami Bharat MSME Day, we are reminded of the immense contribution that micro, small and medium enterprises make to our economies, society and world at large. Today we are honored to have with us Anil Padmanabhan, Economic Analyst, to share insights on the evolving landscape, challenges and opportunities for MSME in India and globally. Thank you, Anil, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Rajesh.
My first question to you is about how do you interpret the significance of the United Nations designating June 27 as the International MSME Day in 2017? What impact has this recognition had globally?
Rajesh, it is an established fact that the MSME sector is a critical part of global industry, whether you look at the United States or even India. So to designate that is very important because this sector suffers from a lot of inadequacies. They may look very small, but they're extremely powerful in their scope and reach, particularly in terms of contribution to GDP or employment or exports. So to create a special day for them puts the spotlight on them and thereby their abilities and potential. And the potential can only be realized if you resolve the impediments.
Right.
So a special day for this is particularly relevant.
You said that they are small, but their importance is too big. Just a figure, MSMEs account for 90% of businesses and up to 70% of employment worldwide. Why do you think MSMEs are so pivotal to global economic stability and growth, and more so in India?
Like I explained, Rajesh, the supply chains, particularly in this new scenario where, you're having friendshoring and all these new terms which are basically limiting the supply chains to like-minded countries. In this situation, no company can produce an entire product within its factory, right? So it will in-source a lot of products. Definitely for most products, you cannot produce it in-house, which means you outsource the product. To understand it, the best example would be Maruti Udyog. Maruti Udyog started about 40 years ago. And it didn't just produce a car, it taught India how to drive. More importantly, it fostered an ecosystem of a supply chain in and around their main factory. In fact, the development of Gurgaon to a large degree can be attributed
to that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that multiplier impact it created, and it put in place standards, because there was a Japanese collaborator who was used to world-class quality. So they were not willing to compromise. But most said Indian MSMEs will not be able to deliver. Looking back 40 years later, they all were proven wrong. So this proves the point that MSMEs have the potential, but they need to be given the opportunity and their impediments need to be tackled.
So Anil, in the context of this year's theme, how do you see MSMEs contributing to both sustainable growth and innovation, especially in a country like ours?
See, Rajesh, the sustainable part is again now becoming a way of life. So let's look at EVs, the latest invention in automobiles. India is catching up very fast. I think we have about 4 million vehicles we have already produced and sold, and many more are on the anvil. Now, one key aspect of that is the battery. Now, that is where the MSMEs are coming in, helping in the production of battery and maintaining and servicing the batteries. So if you look at two-wheelers, for example, now you are bringing this concept of swapping, battery swapping. So it's again an area where MSMEs are proving to be very good. So they're
playing a pivotal role.
Exactly. Giving you a few examples to tell you that how critical they are in the modern economic framework or the modern manufacturing setup, which relies on supply chains.
Okay. Now, in India, we have over 6.5 crore MSMEs contributing 31% to the GDP and roughly 45% to exports. What unique challenges and opportunities do Indian MSMEs face compared to their global counterparts?
One single biggest challenge, Rajesh, is access to credit. You'll be shocked to know that 80% of the MSME sector, which is such a big contributor to India's GDP, accounting for more than a third, suffers for lack of access to credit. And the tragedy is that, one size fits all approach to lending is what is hurting them. So traditionally, lending is based on collateral. Now, MSMEs, given the nature and structure and the size of their investments, the biggest of less than 50 crores, there's little they can offer as collateral. So that means they get denied access to formal finance. They go to informal finance. So formal working capital credit could have come to them at 8 to 12%. Informal, we're talking about 28 to 40%. So you see how the odds are weighed against it by one factor, access to credit. So if you had to focus on one factor holding back India's MSME sector, it's access to credit.
Okay, we'll discuss this after we hear what our president had to say about the micro, small and medium enterprises not only making a significant contribution to the country's gross domestic product, but also promoting innovation at the grassroots levels. Let's hear our president.
MSME के सस्टेनेबिलिटी के लिए इनोवेशन बहुत जरूरी है। सरकार विभिन्न माध्यमों से स्टार्टअप और इनोवेशन की संस्कृति को बढ़ावा दे रही है। DRDO जैसे संस्थानों द्वारा MSMEs को टेक्नोलॉजी ट्रांसफर, इनोवेशन और रिसर्च के लिए फंड जैसे सहायता दी जा रही है, जिससे वे रक्षा और एयरस्पेस के क्षेत्रों में योगदान दे सके।
Okay, Anil, you talked about making credit available to MSMEs. Now, how could that be done? How can we help the MSMEs? How the government can help? How can maybe the bigger private sector kind of work together with them and give them that credit that they so badly need?
See, Rajesh, I think to a large extent this can be resolved through market intervention. So the market recognizes this gap. Okay, so it has already started moving in to fill that gap, and that is the creation of the account aggregator framework, which the Reserve Bank of India has backed. So what the AA framework does is, it is matchmaker between borrowers and lenders. But here, there's a big difference. I explained to you earlier that MSMEs were strapped for funds because they could not raise collateral. But if we looked at their cash flows, they will match any large company's cash flow. So if you look at assets, they don't have, but in terms of cash flow, inventories and whatever, sale receipts, they have invoices, they're huge. So this account aggregator framework focuses on companies' access to working capital based on their cash flow. And this has already been launched about a year ago, and it's beginning to gather momentum, but it'll take time because Government of India has to popularize this. It has to take this message just like it took the family planning message to everybody in this country. Similarly, this account aggregator framework idea should be taken to the entire country, particularly the MSME sector.
Okay, very well said. Since we're talking about MSME's theme this year, which happens to be Udyami Bharat and enhancing the role of MSMEs as drivers of sustainable growth and innovation, how does it reflect the aspirations of the Indian entrepreneurs?
See, again, there's no dearth of aspirations. Whether you look at the Indian consumer or you look at the Indian industrialist or entrepreneur.
And that's why perhaps they're making 31% contribution growth to the GDP.
Exactly. So if you empower them, can you imagine what they can do? So let's look at innovation. Yeah. You did mention about the president putting the spotlight on innovation. There are already schemes like Startup India, Samarth Udyog, MSME Champions. So they are all emphasizing the idea of innovation. And with the entry of AI, the premium on innovation grows. So the more you innovate, the better the chance for you to compete in this world. So a lot of companies, a lot of investments are happening. And the best part about what we are seeing today, the kind of ecosystem for the MSME framework to prosper, is the academic industrial complex. If you look at the United States, Stanford is a classic example of an academic industrial complex, spawned a generation of global companies. Whether you look at Microsoft or any of these, they all had their roots there and then they took off. We have never seen that in India. So you had IITs which are doing cutting edge research, but mainly academic research. This commercial application part has just come into play. So look at IIT Madras, look at IIT Delhi. they are all increasingly creating an idea of startup, which are all in the small scale sector. Agnikul from IIT Madras, it's a space company, it's a now fastest rising space company. Operation Sindoor, you saw so many examples of Indian startups housed in IIT. So the whole ecosystem is changing fundamentally for the better.
Since you mentioned startups, let's hear what President Draupadi Murmu had to say about the importance of sustainability and innovation and the promotion of startup culture in India.
ये प्रसन्नता की विषय है कि एमएसएमई क्षेत्रों में इनोवेशन को बढ़ावा देने और युवा उद्यमियों को अपने विचारों को सफल व्यवसायों में बदलने के लिए प्रोत्साहित करने के लिए आज हैकाथन 5.0 का शुभारंभ किया है। मैं युवाओं से अपील करूंगी कि वे इस पहल में बढ़ चढ़कर भाग लें और अपने आइडिया से देश को समृद्ध बनाएं।
Anil, moving on, how do MSMEs in India empower women, youth and marginalized groups, and what more can be done to enhance their inclusivity?
Rajesh, very simple. You provide a good ecosystem, you will automatically attract good and talented people, regardless of gender. The biggest challenges women and youth face: youth, lack of experience; women, lack of a secure workplace, and other challenges of commute, disrupting their own family life if they are married. These are problems which are in the realm of governance. So the union and state governments need to fix that. But luckily for us, emergence of technology and the work from home and the commoditizing of products, where you need not produce everything in a big factory. You can outsource, simple example, data entry, for example. You can outsource it. So if a woman has a smartphone or a laptop, which the connectivity is growing, and now the broadband connectivity, thanks to the government's rural connectivity program, 80% of our gram panchayats are now on the broadband network. So which means access to the net is not a challenge. So there are many ways in which factors are coming together, but governance, law and order, that ecosystem needs to be fixed. The rest the market will take care.
Okay, talking about participation of women in the MSME sector, President Draupadi Murmu also had something to say about it. Let's hear her.
ये प्रसन्नता की बात है कि एमएसएमई सेक्टर में हाल के वर्षों में महिलाओं की भागीदारी बढ़ी है। हम सब जानते हैं देश में महिलाएं 50% है। जब महिलाओं का रोजगार बढ़ेगा तो देश का जो हम लोगों का सपना 2047 तक देश को विकसित भारत बनाने का, मुझे लगता है वो तब संभव हो सकेगा।
Anil, we did talk about MSME counter in adopting sustainable practices and innovative technologies. What are the barriers that they face?
See, the biggest barrier we discussed is credit. Secondly is regulation. So the compliance burden, whether it is GST in the indirect tax or direct tax, income tax, compliance burden is very high. So which discourages investment when you come in. Then access to technology. But increasingly we are seeing like they're coming, schemes like IDEX, the defense export strategy by the defense ministry, or DRDO partnerships. They are inducting MSMEs into precision manufacturing. Similarly, they're coming into medtech. So they're coming into AI and IoT devices. And of course, EV supply chains I discussed earlier. So whichever way you look at, the new ecosystem is drawing in the MSME sector. But access to technology, the compliance system with regulatory hurdles need to be addressed.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the digital transformation and Industry 4.0 has already been leveraged by the MSME sector for a long-term equitable growth?
The intent is there.
Okay.
I mean, it will take some time. Like I said, we have established their pivotal space in the Indian economy. But whether they get the due credit in terms of literally credit, access to credit and tribute, we have to wait and see.
On that note, Anil, we would like to thank you for your insightful contribution to today's program. Thank you for being with Akashvani.
Thank you, Rajesh.
You are listening to a discussion on Udyami Diwas 2025, Role of MSMEs in Shaping India's Economic Future. The participants were Anil Padmanabhan, Economic Analyst, and Rajesh Laikh, Anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official.
Spotlight.